The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, is the leading trade arrangement between African countries and the U.S. aimed to open the U.S. market to African products. AGOA was signed into law in 2000 and is set to expire in September 2015. Bipartisan members of the House of Representatives and the Senate Africa subcommittees today sponsored a breakfast meeting to discuss progress under AGOA so far and take suggestions on how to improve it to ensure its extension. While there was a consensus on the achievements made under AGOA, including job creation, there was also stress on areas of weakness, including Africa's poor infrastructure, which has not enabled members to take full advantage of AGOA. The members of Congress in attendance pledged to fight to ensure the legislation is passed.
Fortunately, there's so many people throughout Washington, D.C. who have many decades of experience of working on Africa-related issues. And so bringing them all together to hear what they have to say, since they've been involved in the implementation of AGOA, what better way to go about extending AGOA than to hear from people who were involved in writing the original legislation and who have been involved in implementing the legislation over the last several years. In addition, we had representatives from the diplomatic corps, the ambassadors whose countries are most immediately affected by AGOA, to come and give us their input as to what's working and what needs to be improved.
AGOA has proven itself, and obviously there's much more that needs to be done to enhance it. Africa is, I think, going to be the economic powerhouse for many years to come. And the trading shouldn't just be Africans exporting to the U.S. I've introduced a bill that would establish a trade policy so that we would export more to Africa, the United States. And I think that would, a rising tide raises all the boats. That would increase the capacity and the consumerism throughout all of Africa. And I think that would lead to a much higher economic, robust Africa, country by country. So it's a great vision. And AGOA, obviously, it's September 30th, 2015 when it expires. But we are well ahead of the curve. But we have to be very vigilant that we don't wait until September 29th, 2015 to renew it.
Now we have to have a new AGOA. We have to have an AGOA that speaks as well to giving value to democratic societies, to societies without conflict. We have to look at new industries, as has been mentioned. Take the natural resources and build your high-tech and your software industry. Take the natural resources and build your research industry. Take the natural resources and build your medical industry, your complex of hospitals and clinics. And finally, which I think is so crucial, take the natural resources and guarantee every African child a free education up until college age. That is the new Africa. And I agree. Trade is a hand of friendship, but we should not deny that it is important to continue aid in places where it is needed.
Well, joining us now in studio to discuss the African Growth and Opportunity Act is Emira Woods, co-director of Foreign Policy in Focus. Welcome to Africa 54, Emira. So good to have you.
It's an honor to be here with you.
You haven't been into our new studio, so welcome.
Congratulations.
Now, you were at the breakfast meeting today talking about the AGOA renewal possibility in 2015. What did you take away in terms of the discussion centering on what has worked when it comes to AGOA?
Well, first, I think there's a lot of bipartisan interest in renewing discussions well before 2015 on this Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. But I think what we recognize is that, what was intended back in 2000 has not necessarily brought the growth or opportunity for Africa that was intended. So in fact, what you have had is a trade agreement from the United States that has given real preferential treatment, preferential access to Africa's resources, particularly for oil, gas, and mining, the extractive industries. And 90% of U.S. trade with Africa is in those extractive industries, oil, gas, and mining. But clearly, when we think about true growth, true opportunity, what is needed is to expand beyond extracting resources from Africa to actually building manufacturing, processing, job creation opportunities on the continent. And clearly there needs to be a real fair process, you know, not so much that the free trade as projected, but a fair trade where the U.S. ends the subsidies to its own corporations and creates a level playing field where African, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises can actually succeed.
Now, of course, there are only about 40 countries that fall in under AGOA, and basically, of course, dealing also in outside the areas you mentioned, textile and agriculture. What can they do, and who needs to do it to ensure that come 2015, it's a better deal for Africa?
Well, I think this is an opportunity for African governments, for African civil society, for trade unionists to speak up, to demand, you know, their particular conditions for improving trade that will benefit Africa, that will benefit workers, that will protect the environment, and particularly in the extractive industries. Worker protection and environmental protection are two key facets that need to be paid attention to, that need to be adhered if there is to be any kind of an agreement that benefits the people. So I think there needs to be a level playing field, demands placed particularly by resource-rich countries that have so much in terms of setting the agenda. And I think now is the time to begin to put forward what are the particular needs and demands of African workers, of African governments, of African civil society.
The point raised by Congresswoman Lee, the last point about how it's time to change AGOA and start really utilizing the resources now in Africa to benefit its citizens. How do you see that being included in part of this arrangement?
Well, Congresswoman Karen Bass has been phenomenal. She's just come to Congress. This is her second, second term now, and she's really put herself forward as a leader in terms of Africa already. So I think we have to applaud her for taking that mantle and upholding visibility of Africa on Capitol Hill. But clearly, there's a lot of work to be done to not just maintain the status quo, where it's the big oil companies that will benefit from these legislations, but looking at what can be a win-win, both for the U.S. and U.S. Africa. Small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as for small and medium-sized enterprises in Africa to benefit.
And we have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Well, there's time more for this discussion. That's Emira Woods, co-director of Foreign Policy in Focus at the Institute for Policy Studies here in Washington.